The title of this episode is Weird Al, Seinfeld, Partnershipping, and Transactionalism. Hi, Tracy.
Hey, Tim. It's really good to see you. So I started out this episode by saying to Tim, I want to talk about cynicism and fear because that's exactly where I'm at. And because Tim is a purveyor of sunny optimism, but also kind of helping me reframe my own brain on these things. What we actually wound up with today was an episode that is a coda to a lot of our discussions we've been having all year around partnering with the impact economy and what that means for us as businesses, and also what the opportunity is to continue to change the narrative and set a new course for how we work with the impact economy, given that we're all working with some unbelievably strange constraints going on in the world right now. Also, super exciting, Tim has officially announced and launched thehumanstack.com, thehumanstack.com. And that is the outcome of like 4 or 5 years worth of work. Some of which I was very privileged to ride along with when we were working together. So congratulations, Tim.
Thank you. Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah, it's great. And you've even got branding, which is, super cool. Branding. And lastly, we talk about all of our travels, the connections we've been making, the trust building exercises we're trying to do, mentorship, and how our thinking is constantly iterating. We really would love to hear what resonates with you in this one, because we kind of took a very wide palette of themes and condensed them into 40 minutes of talk. So also know that at some point there will be a future episode called Tim and Tracy Tell All the Stories, because I think we've made references to these epic and hilarious and fun and life-changing events that at some point, as a follow-up to our Why It Matters episodes for ourselves from a couple of years ago, it would just be fun to sit around and tell some fireside stories. So
that would be fun.
Hope everybody enjoys this one, and know that this episode started from a really dark place, but I think it ended in a really great one. So enjoy.
Hello, my friend. It has been a minute. It's great
Tim.
to see you.
It sure has been. It's been kind of crazy lately, right?
Oh, man. Yeah, it has been very crazy. I know you've got travel. I thought that we would just start with updates and travels, that kind of stuff before we launch into our topic.
Well, I was thinking this episode, rather than do the whole, we're going to teach you something important. Let's
wait. Do we ever do that? I don't think we've ever in our life.
We do that at the start of every episode. We're like, "Hi, Tim. Hi,
hello.
Tracy.
We're here to teach you something important."
Right. Please pay attention because you'll need it later. We just can't predict how far later.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say this is like the Seinfeld episode almost, right? Because remember, Seinfeld was a show about nothing, but this is actually a show about something that we're going to frame in that framework.
All right. I think what you're saying is that we're going to Seinfeld
this.
We're going to Seinfeld this. Sounds great. That's awesome. Okay. Factoid about Seinfeld. Do you remember Kramer?
Yeah.
Did you ever see UHF, which is the single Weird Al movie?
Weird Al Yankovic?
Yes. And Kramer is Stanley Spadowski, who Stanley Spadowski is Kramer. And so he's the guy that saves the TV station and all that. Anyway.
Okay. There is a Daniel Radcliffe Weird Al movie somewhere out there that
I know
trailers for.
Right.
It's on one of these little obscuro networks where you're just it's on Telemundo North, South Africa, Japan. And you're like, well, how the hell do I get that?
I know. Yeah. You're doing remote VPNs so you can access it. Yeah. Right.
Clearly I need to do
I have seen that, but
and
I
he
also
looks amazing as Weird Al.
He does. It's shocking. Yeah,
And
it is
you're one of the
shocking.
only people in my life old enough to remember when Weird Al was on Dr. Demento
Oh my
back in the
gosh.
day, right?
Dr.
It's
Demento.
Dr.
I have
Demento.
not thought about Dr. Demento in a hot minute.
Yeah.
Like in a hot 2 decades. So yeah,
More like in a
that's
hot
good
four
thought.
because we
I
keep
know
thinking the 80s
exactly.
was
I
20
know.
years ago and it ain't.
So
But
crazy. Okay,
yeah,
I
like,
saw Weird Al in concert. I was like row 3 in it at a weird. And Weird Al is weird, and he's nothing compared to his fans. I think there
oh,
were
I believe
people
it.
that had not left their basements for a long time that were at that show. So
Well, I mean,
yeah,
the only sanctioned performance of Rains in Africa that I can get behind, that's the remake. Some band remade it. I can't remember what. Like Toto did Africa, right? I bless the rains down in Africa.
yeah.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right.
Right.
You know, and my line on remaking anything that Toto did is when you score a freaking Dune film, you can remake a Toto song. And since nobody's done that, I'm like, therefore Toto songs are off limit. But there is a performance of whatever that new band that did Africa again, with Weird Al as the guest. So he comes on with his accordion and everything, and it's really
No
wonderful.
way.
So yeah,
That guy is the best musician.
yeah, he
Like
really
we should
is.
talk about how he is funny, but that guy can play.
Yes, he can.
So anyway,
Yeah, that is the
I
only
don't even
sanctioned
remember
remake
how we
of
got on
Africa.
this. Like, how
Because
in the
Weird Al,
world?
you brought
Oh
up
yeah,
Weird Al,
Stanley
man.
Spadowski. Right? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
mean,
love that the kid. He's got that. This kid finds a marble in the oatmeal and then gets to drink from the fire hose. Like that scene is just like so like burned in my memory. Is okay.
man.
So hey,
So wonderful.
all right. So this
That
is
just
gonna
cheered me up immensely.
yeah.
By the way,
Weird Al has a way of doing that. So
yeah.
okay, yeah. So I hit the road last week and had the best week, and I want to tell you about it because it was so incredibly fun.
Okay.
So
I've been hitting my head against a wall for 3 or 4 weeks. So, like, do tell.
yeah, no, my week sounds better already then.
Yeah.
So how much I love to travel.
I do.
It like feeds my soul. It gets my, my extrovert muscle working. I get out of the Bozeman Shire here, get to like travel to Middle Earth, So
Oh
it
my
was like,
God.
it was so great. So I
Who's
went to
Gandalf in all of this?
I have no idea. But I got to go up and meet Najid Kassam from
Yep. Great guy.
Keela and Fundraising Kit, and was there to do some advising on Fundraising Kit, which was really cool. That tool has so much potential, and the team behind it is just fantastic. So it was really fun to talk with them and take a look at what they were doing, spend a day with them. And Jenny went with me. So we got some time to hang out in Vancouver and see the city. We ate in that, like the restaurant that spins.
I've been up there. That's really fun up there.
Yeah, it was really fun. Really cool.
I ate up there too when I was last in Vancouver. I was like, I didn't do a full meal, but I was like, I just want to get something to eat up here.
No, yeah, cool. It was fun. It was very fun. I did, I left my phone and did like a time lapse on the whole way around, which was also very fun. Anyway.
Were there 2 football fields?
You know what? I thought about that multiple times while I was up there because that was so great.
Yeah, that was good.
So I did that. That was really great. And then I flew to Dreamforce and was at Dreamforce from 8 in the morning. And then I flew out at 8 that night. So into San Francisco, 8 a.m., out of Oakland, 8 p.m. It was great to be at a Dreamforce again. I got to see Katie McFadden, Tim Forbes, Ryan Ozimek, my mentee, Kenny Johnson, who is just killing it. A really, really great guy. Hang out with. I saw Marisa and had dinner with Amy Cubbage, which was great. So it was really like, and I'm forgetting other people I saw in there as well, I'm sure, but it was really fun to just like go in, no sessions, did not even care, did not get a pass. Although I did grab a free meal Thank you, Salesforce, very much for that. And yeah, it was great. It was really fun. Amazing to see the gang and to remember, like, okay, there are real humans here. And that was really, really great.
What I love about that is, like, what are we up to? Like 18, 19 listeners now? It's probably all those people listening who are like, oh yeah, I saw Tim.
I hope so. Yeah, it'd be great. Yeah.
Well,
and I had breakfast with your wife, which was the perfect way to start it all off. So that was absolutely amazing.
I actually looked at my work schedule for a hot minute to see if I could make that work, and it would not work.
I almost was like, hey, come out to play. But then I was like, I know you've got that wall you got to keep hitting your head against, though. I don't want to get in the way of that.
It's like a sport. I'm what you can't see right now on the video is I'm like Jack Nicholson's Joker. I'm just covered with like pancake makeup to keep you guys from seeing the blood on recording.
Awesome. That's amazing. So pancake makeup. I don't know. I'm not even jumping into that.
I think that's what it's called. I don't know.
I did. Who was it? I was telling the story of the day that I met your wife. And told you about that meeting. Someday we need to have an episode where we talk stories, like
it's
Tim
like
Tracy
the big stories episode.
Yeah, that would be fun. That'd be fun. The sponsor table.
At some point, our listenership will find it funny,
exactly. Yeah. So that was really great. And then I flew to Albuquerque to do some writing. So I had 3 days to set aside where I just did writing. I also spoke at the M&A conference remotely.
Yep.
So I interviewed Amy Semple Ward and Afua Bruce. Yeah, it was really fun. I hadn't met Afua before, but really great. And I remember that book is unique. So we're talking about the tech that comes next. And I feel like I knew this, but it crystallized listening to the two of them talk that I feel like I've missed this as well. Their view of technology as a platform to perform social justice activism is, I think, not something all of us, even those of us that are, in tech for good spaces, really grasp the power of. And I think they put that in the book, and it's 2 degrees out of alignment. So a lot of us are missing that, but I really caught that in a fresh way listening to them. And that's such a powerful idea.
Well, I mean, it's actually also kind of similar to the kind of stuff that like Sheila Warren talks about with Crypto Council for Innovation, right? She's like, there's a huge missed opportunity here for social justice in the crypto world. And she's like, everybody's obsessed with whether or not it's real, and nobody's obsessed with how to make other things real through utilization. And she's got a team now over there, and it's really fun watching her kind of grow that. But, at the end of the day, like, there is some missed opportunity in the tech world, right?
Absolutely.
And, it gets to one of the things that we want to talk about today, and that is what's the movement that we're seeing and why. But yeah, I agree with that perspective. I think I have lived enough in my life where, I am a little bit more cynical on how that perspective can reconcile itself with the ordinary ebb and flow of the corporate world that usually these things come out of. And I don't agree that the answer is then therefore destroy capitalism. Because as a former Eastern European studies major, like, I've seen what happens when countries decide to nuke their entire like political and economic systems, and it's ugly for 50 years.
Yeah.
And you could almost point a direct line between what's going on in Ukraine with Russia back to that moment where the Soviet Union collapsed, because this is all about empire building. And if you don't have an empire to build, then what do you have? Right. So it's, I'm a little cynical on that, but I appreciate that it's out there. I try and translate it the best I can.
Well, and the other thing to say about that, I get that. And I think that must even be harder for you, having worked on the corporate side, both before and now. But I think the thing I love about what Amy and Afu are saying is that, like that's going to be what it is.
Yeah.
Right. So let it be. But that's not all there is. So there are all of these other spaces where there are other things that can be done more directly. And I at first I was like, why are they writing this to so many audiences? And by the end, I was like, it's because every audience has to play a part. And those audiences need to take a good hard look at what they're doing and how they participate. And I was like, that it feels so similar to, what we've been up to for so long. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. So I agree that at the corporate level, like there's probably less leverage.
Yeah.
But at other audiences
level,
well, and the professional services level, like, I think that there's more that can be done. Anyway, so it was great to interview them. And then I hung out with the We're for Good team, which was really fun. Oh my gosh. Like it was so great to meet them in person. All four of them. So Abby and Julie and John and Becky were all there. And be like going to this conference that I wasn't part of, but was around. It was really cool to just hang out with them. So, and also met Kashana Palmer, which was really fun as well to meet Kashana, and then got some writing done. So our website, so this is the other update, is that our website for the Human Stack launched yesterday. I had coincidentally, an interview with We Are For Good that also came out yesterday. So, and we're 2 cohorts down, and like, I feel so excited about what we're learning and what we're doing on Human Stack. It feels like, this is a real brand now. So, yeah, those are my updates. It's been that's all in the last 9 days. So that has been a whirlwind of stuff, but really, really fun.
Well, and for folks who are listening, you can't see the video right now. It's funny, like when we started putting this podcast out on real like podcasting platforms, like the YouTube thing tanked, but the listenership
absolutely
grew, right?
Yeah.
Which kind of makes sense, right? Because you're like, why would I play this in YouTube when I can just like plug it in anywhere else, right? But there's 2 things I want to point out. One is Tim is in full living color. It looks like they finally colorized Montana, which is great. And Tim's also got like a big neon capital A right behind him, which is cool. And that's the new brand. And it's been really, I tell folks where I currently work at the day job, about going on this journey and transforming the business that was into the business that will be. And
man,
I
that
have
was a
to
crazy
say,
journey.
like, it's really fun because I'm kind of in this place in my life where I'm like, great, I have a job. I like my job. I like my coworkers. There's a lot of hard work to do. Sometimes it's crazy, but life is good. And like, I don't need to do the things I did a decade ago for me to feel like I have a place in this world. But what's really fun is kind of watching this like 10-year kind of role reversal where everybody's like Tim Lockey and that person that hangs out with him, And I think
no way.
awesome.
I don't think
I think it's awesome.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And I'm like so happy for you watching this launch because it's needed. It's needed to stem the tide of other sort of meta shifts that I'm watching that I think can actually give people real tools.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy for you. I'm ecstatic, actually.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I am too. I think I'm mostly happy because for a good solid 9 months, I think both of us were like, all that stuff we learned, all the stuff we put together over the last few years, like doesn't,
what happened?
Like where's it going to land? And it was not clear that there was a landing spot for it. And I feel like that would have been, it wouldn't have just been hard for me because, it was a waste of time and I'd have to go find a real job or something. But I think it would be hard because I do actually believe this can move market in a positive direction. So anyway, that's what I've been up to. I know that you did some travel and I want to hear about the conference that you went to.
It was insightful. So I traveled, by the time this is out, it'll have been like 2 months ago, but I went to a conference in Miami called Catalyst. And let me just tell you, Miami in late August is not cold.
Nope.
But I had a couple of great aha moments during the course of it. Like, so if you think about how people get into business partnerships, right, there's a few paths. And my path is much less traditional than I think a lot of people's paths, because a lot of people go from sort of salesperson to customer success person to partner success person, right? And that starts their journey in business partnerships. And then they learn like the sort of like hyper rapid, hyper transactional kind of nature of sales is not actually what partnerships need. So, that's a learning curve for people. And there are a lot of people at that conference who are sort of new to the field of partnerships who are like, oh, wow, this isn't a sales job, right? And what I liked about the approach that they were taking is like, look, we have to start thinking about partnerships as an industry. We have to start thinking about professionalizing partnerships and creating real professional benchmarks for people so that these jobs don't become the things that we're all afraid they're going to become. And that is, just a hyper transactional extension of sales. And, there's a couple of tidal waves happening right now in the world. One is everybody's going into sort of knee-jerk recession planning. And from a meta-contextual standpoint, and I'm happy to be wrong about this, but I don't think that's actually true. I think we're living with another crushing externality with the war in Ukraine. But what that also means is the sooner that thing is resolved, it's going to snap back relatively quickly. One way or another, it will be resolved. It has to. But, why that's important is because for the first time ever, like I actually heard other professionals on stage talk about business partnerships, not as the only thing that tacks on ACV into an opportunity, right? And talk about fostering things like trust and alternative KPIs for measuring partner performance. And I asked a lot of questions. I was like, hey, like, I work in an ecosystem where the majority of partners are small businesses and occasionally punctuated by large actors, so like, how do you measure KPIs that actually help a business perform so that as you grow, the business grows and vice versa, right? That's the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night is if I'm a partnerships director, I need to think about 3 or 4 key things. I need to think about democratic access to my business that I'm leading partnerships for, right? So there can't be like the actual or perception of favoritism in that ecosystem. And democratic access is a really wide thing, right? It's like, how do I make sure everybody has the same enablement? How do I make sure everybody has the same pathways to sales reps? How do I make sure everybody has the same pathways to product roadmap? And how do I give everybody input into product and community, right? In a democratic fashion. But then how do we reward ambition and growth, right? That's another thing. And how do we make sure that that growth isn't codependent and predicated on, kind of strange economic kind of actions? And then ultimately, how do we foster genuine community, which is, to me, always a linchpin of fostering connection between the impact economy and the commercial businesses that serve them, right? So these are the big picture kind of questions that I'm thinking about. And for the first time, I went to a conference where people are like, yeah, we're actually thinking about that too, except, I serve manufacturing. Or I had a great conversation with this one guy who was like from a platform that literally tracks it's not the flatbed trucks, but it's the shipping containers.
Yeah.
Yeah, like how all containers are standardized, right? Like his company is an app that tracks shipping containers and connects
That's
and integrates
amazing.
to it. And I was like, dude, this I mean, it for lack of a better way of saying it, this shit was fascinating.
Absolutely.
And he was telling me about like, yeah, when we turned into, again, I'm going to use my language for it, but like when we turned into like a polyamorous entity and realized that integrations and applications increase customer stickiness and partner satisfaction, it changed our year-over-year retention unbelievably, in our world. And I think that has always been something that has been, deep in my heart around, when I get up on a rampart and scream like nonprofits should own their own data, when I get up on a rampart and scream like, we have to do better for the impact economy, it's that kind of thinking that's informing it, because what I see is a world where, two things are true. You can make $1.01. You might not be able to make it the same way you make it serving other commercial business to business entities, but you can make $1.01. And you can also elevate the organizations that are actually using your tool, right? And, full disclosure, I got on in the pre-game for this call, and I was like, the name of this episode should be Cynicism and Fear, because that's exactly where I'm at. And Tim, you did what you do, and you're like, well, let's take a step back for that. I'm like, but my fear is genuinely that this unbelievably chaotic moment in our world, where we just put in, a government in Italy that is just shy of Benito Mussolini in terms of its thinking and perceptions. We have Russia threatening to actually use nuclear devices on the battlefield in Ukraine, right? Like, my fear is that those things are driving us backwards in terms of like, oh crap, doing all this other stuff feels like a lot of work right now, but we know these knee-jerk motions work. So we're just going to go back to our knee-jerk motions, which are very, very transactional and longitudinally, in my opinion, detrimental to the impact economy, because that's not an economy that thrives on transactionalism. That's an economy that thrives on partnership, right? So, anywho, the conference was super affirmational. I got to connect with a few teams at work. I will give a shout out publicly to an old friend and mentor, Dave Averill from Salesforce, where, I finally got to see everything that he was doing reflected in my own actions. I was like, why does Dave do this? Oh, why did Dave? Oh, so it was nice. And,
Great.
I had a moment to thank him at a party. I went to exactly one event at the massive Dreamforce thing. It was a party that Idealist
Did you go to
Consulting.
the engagement party?
I went to the Idealist engagement party.
Rob invited me to that, and I was like, I really want to go.
Okay, so Rob wasn't there, which was hilarious.
What?
So yeah, it was great. Save this one for our stories episode, but that was a really funny party.
All right,
I had an
good.
opportunity to thank Dave for his like mentorship and kind of like watching his structured thinking around this. And so I will say that my deep concern over the next few months and into 2023 is that everybody wants to retreat to motions they know work, and this is exactly the moment where we need to do the opposite. And it's really funny, coming out of that conference, I had a conversation with a guy that I'm hoping to pull into this podcast, but he tapped into something in my LinkedIn profile, which was a talk I gave like 5 years ago called The Technology Strategy of Love. And he was like, this is exactly what we need right now. And I was like, I literally, God's bless him. Like, I had to go back and reread it because I was like, I forgot that I did that. And I also forgot what I said.
Was that the Traction conference that you keynoted?
No, it was at a Net Squared, not Net Hope, but Net Squared. There's a lot of lots of nets
out here.
Yeah, lots of nets. It was like 300 people, so it was kind of small.
Fun.
The Traction thing was different. But much like on Kanto, we don't talk about traction.
Okay.
So anyhow, yeah, long
Okay. So
story
here's
short,
where,
I reread it and I was like, oh my God, Tracy, were you high when you wrote this? Because this is so far out like stuff. So I've had a moment to sort of sit in a bit of cynicism, because the distance between who I was when I wrote that and the distance to where I am now feels very far in my mind, you know?
yeah. I mean, that totally makes sense. Like a lot of shit's gone down since then. Okay, so people are gonna like knee jerk back to what they know for sure. That's expected. Not all of those knee jerk reactions are bad. Like, this is the first thing I want to say. The second thing is that I do think that partnerships will sort themselves out in the long run and show that transactionalism is not the best way to conduct business. And that will show up faster in partnerships than it will with customers. Because
I think that's right too.
With customers, you really are focused, in sales is focused on a transaction moment. Like, that's the whole point. Partnerships, you are focused on a conveyor belt of actions. And if, like, people will have very little patience for a transactional mode of conveyor belt. Like, that just is it's more obvious that you're not in it for the long haul. You're just in it for like the short transaction. I just don't think that will be as effective, as it is in sales. Does that make sense, or am I naive?
No, I don't think you're naive. I think what it is that, I hate to go sort of hyper capitalist meta here, but, when you are running a business, your primary customer is your business, right? So at some point, that conveyor belt works. And I have seen businesses, grow really well playing that conveyor belt. Now, I'm not going to name names, but I will say, do people like or respect them as businesses? Do people like or respect their owners? No, they actually don't. But it works. So when your primary incentive and your primary customer is your business, those actions work really well. And what we need to start thinking about, and I think there's a lot of people thinking this way, but there's not yet a perfect path, is what I would say. There's a lot of people who are thinking like, great, like if the knee-jerk things work, then we're going to do it. But the problem is a lot of people right now in this moment are not talking about what works for the next 3 to 6 months, because a lot of people are pointing backwards and saying, hey, we're watching the world burn because we made a lot of decisions that worked for 3 to 6 months. So like, maybe we need to adjust the timeline of our thinking around what it means to do this stuff, right? And that is something that is not economically incentivized in a growth motion. So
I think that's true.
That's the challenge that we have, is how do you economically incentivize long tail thinking?
Well, and partly and I watched this, being at every level, I think, as a partner with Salesforce.org. I think Now It Matters was every level on there at some point, which I think is really, really interesting. And I personally felt like there's more than one type of partnership, and a lot of corporate models don't allow for that.
Yeah.
So I think one issue is, like, if and a lot of this got, like, who did you know inside the partnership program, which is fine. And what level of like, what were you there to do? So Now It Matters was always there to try and shift the market in a different way. Like our business model was to create experts, and that's what we did really well. We did not create a high amount of throughput for ACV, like, and never planned to. And I think that was, I just think that there need to be in these partnership programs, I think there need to be different ways of operating in that. And to your point, one of the things I kept finding was that corporations don't know, they can't hold up a mirror to themselves and say, what value could I be to this partner? And
that's right.
And I feel like for small businesses, there's a completely different playbook than for larger actors.
That's right.
And you could be like, the partnership program could be an absolute hero, the way that the Trailblazer program is for individuals in the Salesforce ecosystem. That type of economic incentive to learn a platform and go deep with it.
Yep.
Could have twice the power if it were approached, if partnerships were approached with the same degree of build your skill set and your business here. And I just think, I think that there's a low threshold for understanding how valuable that could be for really small businesses that are just getting started.
Well, I will say, and I mean, this is the job that I'm on about right now. It's like, how do we build a partnership program for an impact economy serving business from scratch, essentially?
Yeah, right.
And do so in a way that respects existing means of revenue, which are very wide and diverse, but also changes that thinking. And the best I got down that path so far is a rubric. Is rubric? No, rubric's the wrong word. Is a matrix of KPIs that answer 4 questions, right? The 4 questions are: what builds the partner business? What builds the customer success? What builds actual growth, meaning like money and economy? And what builds shared brand, right? And so like my first attempt at that is to say, we can't have a program that has too many KPIs that are sitting solely in the growth column.
Yep, right.
So you have to have a program that answers those other questions. And, hopefully some of that will make its way into it. I don't know, like, it's too early to tell, right? So, but if that's the best thinking I've gotten down that path so far, is we need to stop asking what builds growth alone and start asking other questions, and let asking those questions shape the categorization of the KPIs that we're using to measure a business partnership ecosystem, which is one better answer than I had before, than when we last talked about this, because I was like, I don't know what's going to happen here.
Yeah.
But that's the outcome of why I'm wearing all the pancake makeup to hide the blood from banging my head against the wall, is God, if and I the other thing that happened for me, truly, just going back to the start of this episode, and I will call this out because wow, I'm not frequently a person to exhibit vulnerability in like real life. I'm just not. I've learned the hard way that you exhibit vulnerability in the world is kind of like, here's a bunch of hyenas ready to eat you. But I will say that one thing that really kicked me down was I got the COVIDs in July. And, this virus affects everybody differently. We know that already. We know the variants just blew through the 4 vaccinations I had against the core thing, like tissue paper, because that's the nature of epidemiology. By the way, this is not an anti-science rant. So like, sorry, if you're looking for me to say something like extreme, I'm not. What I'm saying is science works, and that's how vaccines work. And that's why we get a flu shot every year. But, my point being, it affected me profoundly. And I was looking at my exercise tracking, and it was like, it went from like high output in June to 0 July and August. Like, I'm still recovering from it. It took me a long time. And like, Tim, like, I called you 4 weeks into the jig being like, I'm losing my damn mind here. So, and what's really funny is a colleague at work was like, I thought you were being dramatic about this sort of brain fog thing, and then I got COVID, and oh my God, you were totally right.
Oh, it is a
So,
beast. Absolutely.
Why I'm saying this all is because where was I going with this? It was tying back to, we have to do something different, right? And if we can't look at that kind of thing from the lens of like, well, what happens when one of my business partners has the same shit happen to their staff? If all we're doing is looking at partnerships through transactionalism and growth, that means that partner's output is going to go down, and you're not going to track the fact that they're just a human trying to take care of their team and their business, right?
Yep.
That's the fallacy of that thinking. And that's the point.
Yep.
Along the way with science works, please get vaccinated, and like, stop the QAnon anti-vax stuff, please, people. It's really not serving anybody. But aside from that, like, truly, that's the kind of partnership that we want in our world, where it's like, okay, man, like, I got it, like, your business is hurting right now. What can we do to help keep your business moving forward?
And the more that you think about partnerships as building relationships between people, the healthier and more long-term those partnerships are going to be. Because to your point, you can have a high ACV, and that may not be telling you the data that you think it is. And that may not be building the experience that your customers want to have, right? And I think that's material to it. I would also say that a lot of what I've found missing in a lot of the partnership programs, and I'm like, this is not my usual advice, but as I'm thinking about this and being a partnership business owner, I feel like, especially for small partners, a lot of benefit could come from just recognizing how important letting small business partners know their business is real and seen would go. Like, small personal actions would outweigh large enablement plays, like, every single time.
I know.
And it's so simple, and just, like, you'll spend months building a playbook, and not because it needs to be done. So I'm not saying it's either or, but I do think that was one of the things that I learned. And I think that Salesforce really took a shift when Amy came on and started making those kinds of plays where it was, it was more personalized. The summits started to happen. There was a lot of, here's something to learn. And sometimes it was not on brand what was getting taught. And I just I thought all the partners respected and appreciated that. So I feel like, there's a lot there too.
I'd be remiss if I didn't say, like, some of those best outputs is, informing my own playbook for where I'm at in my day job, because I'm like, okay, we did some things right here. Like, I tell folks at work all the time, I know partnership programs from having lived through it with Blackbaud as a customer. I know partnerships from having built it, at Salesforce. And I know partnerships from having been on the advisory board at Tech for Social Impact, right? And
not to mention owning a business and being a partner, and then being in multiple other businesses as a partner. Yeah, I agree.
So it's like
multiple times.
What I don't do anymore is say that all of these programs are unhealthy. What I do say is that, we have to cherry pick now the strategies that really work.
Yep, I agree.
And we have to apply them judiciously. And moments like we're living through, I mean, going back to why I wanted to call this episode like Fear and Cynicism, Like moments like we're living through is actually where we need to step into that, right? We have to say this is truly an unknown. Now, how successful, any of that will be, time will tell, but it is the cogitation that, keeps me up at night these days and ages, is like, shoot, it's not enough to do what we've been doing, but the forces of everything else happening in the world is driving us to react right back towards do what you've been doing, because it's clearly a path that works.
Yeah, right.
And what they don't see are the 1,000 kind of conversations that you and I have all the time, or the off the cuff remarks that you'll hear from a partner or a customer that lets you know how they're really thinking about things. And there's still a disconnect there, so we have to try.
The other thing, yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more that this is not the time to pull back on a strategy that was long-term. Doesn't matter. Like, all moments are scary. That's the thing I also want to say to you is I've never known you to not be like looking at the world and saying the macro of everything that's going on leads to this terrible conclusion. And, I think that because all moments have themes of disaster in them. I'm not saying that this one's not worse. Like, absolutely, like we may be hitting a crescendo, but we may just be like on the front end of that too. So it could, and I think that that's my point. This is not the moment to make a change on a strategy that's been being built. The other thing that I haven't really thought about this before in terms of partnerships, but there are, like, I imagine, and your current position may not be this at all, but I imagine that there are times at which you don't want a democratic approach. You want a couple of really quick, high gunning,
unbelievably true,
really tight partners to set the stage and to set the bar for what partnership looks like for whatever organization that is. And and the access on that may not be equivalent to the access on somebody else that's just like showing up for the first. I don't feel like, like it has to be democratic and equal access from day one. Nor do I think that I actually also think pay to play models are really beneficial at some stage, again, like
at some stage,
and different layers and types of partners. But I think that's all part of the part of the messaging here.
Math, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's, to what we were talking about before we hit record. I think, for me, this is the moment where you throw the anchor farthest into the future.
Yeah.
And then you just make a decision on like how many links you want to implement to get there.
Yeah. That's true.
Right? Like, that's all you need to do.
That's where you're genius too, by the way. Not everybody can like do what you're talking about there. That is a superpower of yours. I saw you do it at Now It Matters. I've seen you do it everywhere you go. And I think I think that's just like, it's really impressive. It'll be fun to watch how that shakes out. And it's non-transactional too. The thing that's interesting about you, Tracy, is that while you are going to champion that it's non-transactional, you're also very aware that transactions do matter. I think that's the thing. I feel like people can fall on either side, where it's kumbaya land, or is just like, give me the receipt next in line. Right. And I feel like your balance of, hey, we're in this to build relationships, and at the same time, there's an economic functionality that has to be in place. I just think that's kind of interesting too.
Ecosystems have differently shaped economic constraints.
Absolutely.
Right? That's the other thing we need to understand. Like,
right.
When I was in Miami, I kid you not, I spent 6 hours out with one sales team. And that's all we say. We say what happened in Miami stays in Miami. But the premise of the conversation was like, hey, we can't trust you if what you're doing is slowing down that exact motion that we need to fulfill opportunities in this way. And I was like, okay, you're fundamentally misconstruing what I'm saying. So let's talk about it, right? Let's really talk about it. And we got to some really interesting places in the conversation. Like, ultimately, it was a great night out. It really was. I was exhausted the next day because found my way back to the hotel room around 2:30 in the morning. But was it worth it? Absolutely. And that's what, also you've got to do is you have to recognize that you can dream a lot, but at the end of the day, there are peoples whose livelihoods are not conditioned on that dreaming.
Those dreams need to have legs.
You need to like understand what it is that those livelihoods exist within, so that you can like shape your thinking around that too. And it doesn't make it bad, right? Yeah. Like I said at one point during the conversation, look, this is all cultural, is what it boils down to more than anything else. I was like, I know salespeople really well. And I was like, I've had the privilege of riding aside some really talented sales folks. I was like, I know your world. Like, you need to understand, I know your world. And the last thing I'm going to do is, put roadblocks up when you're looking at like 3 days to respond to an RFI, and all you got to do is find the right categorization of thing to submit to it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not going to come in and be like, hey, let's talk about feelings. No.
And I think that's what it sounds like when you're talking about transactionalism. I think that it's really important to balance it out with, with that. And I know that we are short on time.
We are.
Any last thoughts on partnershiping and transactionalism?
Well, Tim, what you're pressing on is super important to understand. And that is, unless we, like the royal we, decide what we want to do is fundamentally shift our economy. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't. I'm saying that it's going to be a 50-year slogging journey that's going to put everybody into poverty and create like mass wide scale like famine and uprising. But sure, what I will say is, unless we decide we fundamentally want to shift the underpinnings of our economy, making the next dollar is going to be equally as important. And it is equally as important to that small business as it is that sales guy who's just trying to like turn the deal, get the opportunity closed, and move forward, right? So, one of the meta lessons that we have to digest is, there's a lot of nuance when it comes to serving the impact economy and serving it well. And at the same time, the thing that I don't think we've been great about is educating the impact economy around the real realities of what it means to be a business. Because we try to hide it in marketing, like we try to hide it and do this and you'll feel good. But there's actually some education that needs to take place around, like, if you guys want to like do 4,000 open source projects with no coherent developer team and 500 like flavors of Linux, go for it. But like, if what you want to do is buy serious enterprise grade software, we haven't educated the impact economy as to what that really comes with and why folks are acting the way they are in the first place. And I think that's another area we can do better.
Yep. And I do think, I was just talking on another podcast right before this one. I do think professional services is the branch that has to lead the charge on that. And, I'm going to say next is that we need to start focusing on humans, right? Of course, nobody's going to disagree with that.
Big capital neon A.
Right. Yeah. You, well, but the point here is like, until the Big Mac was invented, if you wanted a Big Mac, you couldn't have one. Right now, if we want to see like these kinds of this kind of technology hit the ecosystem a way that's going to land, we have to like balance out and create products that nonprofits can buy that will more likely lead to outcomes that are positive for them. And right now, I think that they just know, like, okay, it's a crapshoot. If we roll the dice on a big, expensive system, who knows if that's going to land? That's not because the software doesn't work. And it's not because the nonprofit couldn't be capable if they were approached the right way. It's because professional services continues to let all like they let nonprofits decide what they're going to buy and don't create those products. So I'm with you right there. I think that it really is time for the consultants to say, here is what success looks like. It is purchasable, but it's not free. And we're not going to slide it into we're not going to just slide it into the project management, budget and pad it out because you don't want to buy it, but we know that you need some of it. So anyway,
project management's a great skill, but you're spot on right.
Exactly.
I think it's a great place to end it.
Yeah.
So thanks, folks, for bearing with our Seinfeld episode today, where we talked about everything and nothing, but hopefully you got something out of it. Yeah,
partnershiping and transactionalism, I think, is actually a good way to frame it. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you, Tim.
This is Tracy Kronzak.
And I'm Tim Lockey.
And you've been listening to Why It Matters, an independent production that captures our passions, personalities, and purpose for technology as applied to the impact economy.
All of that's important, but even more important, we are here to have fun and introduce some of the people and ideas that keep us up at night and get us out of bed in the morning.
We are so grateful that you've been listening to us. We have no idea why you'd want to do that. Maybe you lost a bet. Maybe you're stuck in a car with someone else controlling the sound system. Or maybe you are truly interested in what we have to say.
Whatever the reason, whether it's a bet or you're a believer, would you hit subscribe? Or if you've already done that, would you mind leaving us a review? And if you're really brave or want to punish someone, please recommend this podcast to your friends, enemies, and family.
And all kidding aside, thanks for tuning in, and we are so glad that you're here.